Shravanam Diaries podcast.
Hare Krishna, we are continuing to read Bhagavad Gita as it is, the book by His Divine Grace, Abhay Charanaravinda Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Chapter 18, The Perfection of Renunciation. Text 47. Shreyan svadharma vigunah paradharmat svanushthitat svabhava niyatam karma kurvannapnoti kilbisham. It is better to engage in one's own occupation, even though one may perform it imperfectly, than to accept another's occupation and perform it perfectly. Duties prescribed according to one's nature are never affected by sinful reactions. Purport. One's occupational duty is prescribed in Bhagavad Gita. As already discussed in previous verses, the duties of a Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, and Shudra are prescribed according to their particular modes of nature. One should not imitate another's duty. A man who is by nature attracted to the kind of work done by Shudras should not artificially claim to be a Brahmana, although he may have been born into a Brahmana family. In this way, one should work according to his own nature. No work is abominable if performed in the service of the Supreme Lord. The occupational duty of a Brahmana is certainly in the mode of goodness, but if a person is not, by nature, in the mode of goodness, he should not imitate the occupational duty of a Brahmana. For a Kshatriya, or administrator, there are so many abominable things. A Kshatriya has to be violent to kill his enemies, and sometimes a Kshatriya has to tell lies for the sake of diplomacy. Such violence and duplicity accompany political affairs. But a Kshatriya is not supposed to give up his occupational duty and try to perform the duties of a Brahmana. One should act to satisfy the Supreme Lord. For example, Arjuna was a Kshatriya. He was hesitating to fight the other party. But if such fighting is performed for the sake of Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, there is no need, there need be no fear of degradation. In the business field also, sometimes a merchant has to tell so many lies to make a profit. If he does not do so, there can be no profit. Sometimes a merchant says, "Oh, my dear customer, for you, I am making no profit." But one should know that without profit, the merchant cannot exist. Therefore, it should be taken as a simple lie if a merchant says that he is not making profit. But the merchant should not think that because he is engaged in an occupation in which the telling of lies is compulsory, he should give up his profession and pursue the profession of a Brahmana. That is not recommended. Whether one is a Kshatriya, a Vaishya, or a Shudra, doesn't matter if he serves by his work the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Even Brahmanas who perform different types of sacrifices sometimes must kill animals because sometimes animals are sacrificed in such ceremonies. Similarly, if a Kshatriya engaged in his own occupation kills an enemy, there's no sin incurred. In the 3rd chapter, these matters have been clearly and elaborately explained. Every man should work for the purpose of yajna, or for Vishnu, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Anything done for personal sense gratification is a cause of bondage. The conclusion is that everyone should be engaged according to the particular mode of nature he has acquired, and he should not decide to work otherwise. And he should decide to work only to serve the supreme cause of the Supreme Lord. Jai. Yeah, there are certain natures, and to tell you honestly, like, I have burned my fingers a couple of times when I tried to in some way pursue things that were not in my nature. Say I was a responsible person and dutiful, honest, and a drama group director, she really liked me and she put me as a manager. And even though technically I was getting things done, meaning the rehearsals were on, traveling arrangements were done, all the structure was made, all of the categorization of people who stays with whom, everything was done, but I was broken inside, like in 10 different places, because for me it was very difficult to manage, because it was like very hard for me to handle the pressure. It's not my nature. It's just not my nature to tell people what to do, to kind of, like arrange big. There are people who do it like with pleasure. There are people who do it so naturally. There are people who have the Shakti, the Adhikar, that power to do this, and they love it. I don't. I'm not that kind of person. That's all. But again, here it's better to do your own nature, to follow your own nature, engage in the Lord's service, than do somebody else's, because it's dangerous, right? Another example is that I cannot, like, I would never be like a very good businessman in a very strict term, Like my sister, she's presently having some service at the gift shop, and she was saying that she feels it so natural. Like, I quote her, she's like saying, $1 million only for you. That she can have that kind of attitude and that kind of mood, because that's what business is about, you making profit, because otherwise there is no meaning of economics. You get something cheaper, you sell it a little more expensive. That's how it works. It's just not in my blood, but I know, like, I have some acquaintances who just love to do business. Like, they're just so business minded, they just constantly think about startups. That's their nature. But if I would want to put myself through this, and it's it's gonna, again, it's like self-harassment for me. So it's very important to follow your own nature and stick with like-minded people, and really not, like Prabhupada says, there is no work that is like bad. Like, every work is honorable. Somebody is a merchant, somebody is a kshatriya. There is some violence, there is some duplicity involved, otherwise how can you be diplomatic? So this leads us to the next important verse. Text 48. Sahajam karma kaunteya sadosham apinatyajit sarvarambha hidoshena dhumena agnir ivavritah. Every endeavor is covered by some fault, just as fire is covered by smoke. Therefore, one should not give up the work born of his nature, O son of Kunti, even if such work is full of fault. The key word is every, right? Every endeavor is covered by some fault, just as fire is covered by smoke. Now let's read the purport. In conditioned life, all work is contaminated by the material modes of nature. Even if one is a Brahmana, he has to perform sacrifices in which animal killing is necessary. Similarly, a Kshatriya, however pious he may be, has to fight enemies. He cannot avoid it. Similarly, a merchant, however pious he may be, must sometimes hide his profit to stay in business. Or he may sometimes have to do business on the black market. These things are necessary, one cannot avoid them. Similarly, even though a man is a Shudra serving a bad master, he has to carry out the order of the master, even though it should not be done. Despite these flaws, one should continue to carry out his prescribed duties, for they are born out of his own nature. A very nice example is given herein. Although fire is pure, still there is smoke. Yet smoke does not make the fire impure. Even though there is smoke in the fire, fire is still considered to be the purest of all elements. If one prefers to give up the work of a Kshatriya and take up the occupation of a Brahmana, he is not assured that in the occupation of a Brahmana there are no unpleasant duties. Unpleasant duties. What are some of the unpleasant duties of a Brahmana? Teaching a student who is ungrateful, for example. Having to tolerate that kind of disrespect even though you've invested something into somebody else. There are many different unpleasant things in every occupation, even the most honorable. Okay, one may then conclude that in the material world no one can be completely free from the contamination of material nature. This example of fire and smoke is very appropriate in this connection. When in winter time one takes a stone from the fire, sometimes smoke disturbs the eyes and other parts of the body, but still one must make use of the fire despite disturbing conditions. Similarly, one should not give up his natural occupation because there are some disturbing elements. Rather, one should be determined to serve the Supreme Lord by his occupational duty in Krishna consciousness. That is the perfectional point. When a particular type of occupation is performed for the satisfaction of the Supreme Lord, all the defects in that particular occupation are purified. When the results of work are purified, when connected with devotional service, one becomes perfect in seeing the self within. And that is self-realization. Thank you so much for tuning in today. The book links, previous episodes timeline, and biography of the author can be found on shravanamdiaries.com. The link is in the description, and we shall see you tomorrow. Hare Krishna, Krishna